Hey guys, and welcome back to the INSITE channel. Today we have Techgirl in the Crosshair. You might know her from the recent Major, Cologne, Gamers 8, but she actually has a really rich history that we are going to delve in today. But before we do get started, how are you doing today, Sam?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm excited to finally get to chat to you. I think it's been I saw you at the major, but then before that it had been almost a year since we'd caught up. So it's cool
Yeah.
to be able to catch up virtually.
Yes, and yeah, that's something I want to to talk about after in a bit because I feel like when we first met, you kind of like popped into my sphere, like as in CS in general, like out of nowhere. I was like, "Ooh, who's this tech girl?" And then you just appeared then everywhere else afterwards. But before we, so yeah, so like getting into this interview now, I want to first touch on how you got into esports, like originally. So naturally, you come from South Africa, a region where esports isn't too popular at all. I want to kind of ask, like, how first did you hear about esports, and did you ever think that you'd actually be able to make a career off this?
So I mean, to answer the second question first, no. But how did I hear about esports? My brother actually played Dota. He was obsessed with Dota, and he always had his mates around every weekend, and they were always playing Dota in our dining room. We lived in quite a small place with my mom. So like the lounge was right by the dining room, which meant I couldn't watch television or play games or do anything because they kind of our computers and everything was in this dining room and they took it over every weekend. And I just became sort of I was just the listener, right? I was always sitting there listening to them, and they were there every weekend. And they had formed a team. They were like this little band of friends who were going to play Dota, and they were starting to compete. So esports in South Africa, there used to be like one event a year. There were these couple of like random lands that existed in weird places, but the big event every year was what they called Rage and DGL, which was the Digital Gaming League. Rage was this massive gaming expo. It was the one thing we had once a year, but in the basements of Rage was where DGL used to happen. And you would play all year and then you would get to go to LAN. And it was like the one LAN we had. And my brother and his friends formed this team and they wanted to play Dota at Rage. And they ended up qualifying, and I was like kind of there for their journey. They go to Rage, they play in the basement. I think they were like one game or something against Bravado, who most people, if they follow Counter Strike, know Bravado Gaming. But Bravado had a very strong Dota team. It was all very exciting because no one had been able to beat Bravado. They then got signed to an org, and then the whole thing fell apart because some of them started playing Counter Strike and wanted to play Counter Strike, and were playing Counter Strike in my house on the weekends. And then some of the others, there was a girlfriend involved, and someone else liked. You know how it goes when you're young, you just
Yeah.
mess around. But through all of that, I kind of got involved. And I mean, at the time, it wasn't even like I was going, "Oh, this is esports. I like esports." This was just my brother and his mates, and ultimately they became my mates. Playing once a year, we went to Rage, and it was like this really exciting thing. And I used to go watch them. And then what ended up happening is all this like cash injection came in. By then, my brother had stopped. He was still playing, but he wasn't competitive. But his friends were still coming to our house every weekend. They had all started playing Counter Strike. That was the one that like I really loved and thought was super interesting. And then what happened was there was like this massive cash injection from like a telecoms company in South Africa out of the blue. And they paid all this money to launch this like what they were now calling the DGL Masters. And for the first time, they were taking everyone out of the basement and the best teams would be on this big stage at Rage. It was all very exciting for us. And they did this massive launch event. You know, those ridiculous brand ones where it's like fancy catering, open bar, and they had all the
Oh
teams there.
yeah.
And then they had this giant egg. I will never forget this. This massive egg opens, and poor Redeye is in the middle of the egg. They've flown him from the UK, put him in the egg for him to announce that this event is happening. That was literally what they paid him for. Absolutely makes no sense now when I look back. What a waste of money. The scene needed that money for so many other things. But that was it. Paul was there. And one of my brother's friends, who was my friend and is now still a good friend, a player called Goals, who went overseas a few times for Counter Strike and got destroyed, but was there, and he was just running around and he was so excited. And he came running up to me and he was like, "Sam, this is the best day. This is it. Like esports is finally legit here. Like we're going to be taken seriously. This is a big deal." And he ran off. And I was so sad because I'd been studying journalism. I'd started working at a radio station here. I'd started a blog because I was getting kind of frustrated being told how to write things. And at the time I was doing just like tech reviews and gaming reviews. It was like a very like amateur type of thing. But I watched Ash run around and I was really sad because I knew how like the media machine worked. So I was like, everyone's very excited tonight with all the flashing lights, but tomorrow, no one outside of our little small group is going to care. They just, it's not going to matter. They're just going to move on to the next thing. And I got this like bee in my bonnet. I've actually still got that article somewhere where I wrote where I was like, you know what, screw it. I'm going to tell these players stories because I know them. I've been around them for so long and they deserve the coverage and you should know the struggles they've been through because a lot of them had like really fascinating stories. And I was like, no one else is going to tell them. So I will. And then I started doing that. I just started writing about esports and I started doing videos. I'd been there already quietly as an observer for a couple of years, but that was when I kind of went, okay, now I'm gonna do something because I've never been good enough. I love playing. I'm just really shit at it. So I've never been good enough to compete. I've tried. I was in an Overwatch team for a while. It went very badly. But yeah, I mean, just because my friend and I are really fun to play with, but we're not fun in a team environment. But that was the thing. I just was like, I want to tell these stories. I've always been a storyteller. I love telling stories. I don't like to be the story. So that was what I decided to do. And that was literally when I started, like, I suppose turning it into a job. At the time, I wasn't doing it for money or anything else. I was just doing it because I felt like my friends deserved better treatment and better exposure. But obviously, over time, then all sorts of things happened. And then next thing, it became my job.
Okay, so it was very accidental, it seems like. You kind of went from like the journalism side to it then being like, oh, I'm stage hosting. Or like hosting in general, like events. So how, yeah, so like explain that kind of bridge. So I'm guessing the first DGL Masters you're talking about, was this 2015, 2014? Because you ended up hosting it as part of Redeye in 2016. Are these different separate events or are they
No, that's the
similar?
big one. So that was the one.
Okay,
Basically, what ended up happening is they made this announcement. And to be clear, the story of my career is everything tends to just be like, I feel like I just stumble into things because I don't really,
okay,
I think like a lot of people don't believe me when I say this. I plan nothing. I just kind of whatever happens. Yeah, I just go with it. Whatever happens. But what happened there was I then decided I was going to start telling these stories. So little journalist Sam was like doing these ridiculous interviews, writing these blogs. Then I started making videos. I've deleted all of them from the internet because they were so bad. I had this thing that I was like, we need to be like more. This was in my mind because I knew nothing. Was like we need to reach a bigger audience of gamers. So we
okay.
can't be like specific about the game. We can't be talking about Dota. We can't be talking about Counter-Strike because we want to get the casual gamer. Because you know that whole like old school esports mindset, we must get the casual gamer engaged. At the time, I really believed that. So I started doing like really weird things where like it would be like, what are your favorite movies? And then my worst one, like the one that makes me cringe, is I did this whole video series of the bachelors of
I did
Counter-Strike.
say that, yeah.
Yeah, because I was like, I need to show everyone like these are normal guys. They like, and I'll never forget poor little JT, who's now obviously in complexity. I think he was like 16. Oh, he was so unhappy, and his dad made him do it. It's so bad. But anyway, I did like all these weird videos. So I was doing that. So I was always at these events, running around doing stupid stuff. And what ended up happening was they had obviously organized for Redeye to come and host this big event. And Redeye had said that he wants to work with South African talent. So there was like the handful of esports people at the time. It was a very small group. They all got the job. But then what happened was there was, funny enough, a PR person who was a woman who knew nothing about gaming was like, oh, we need a woman. Like this is a very boys centric thing. So I'm well aware of this and I own it. I was a diversity hire. They phoned me up. They're like, we need a woman. You're always at these events. You come do this. I was not qualified. I'd never put an in-ear in my ear. I've never hosted anything. I'm making ridiculously bad videos on my cell phone. But of course, I was like, oh, cool. That's Redeye. I get to meet him. That's pretty sick. Because obviously, I'd been like, I knew I was watching esports. I knew who Redeye was. Plus, I was like, I get free tickets to Rage. That's kind of cool. Like I'm in. I had no clue what I was doing. On the first, I mean, we arrived for rehearsals, and I was just like, shit. Like there was just this
Mm.
production team of people telling me all these things, and I'm pretending like I knew what the hell was going on. I had done like some interviews earlier on in another when they sort of told me that they were going to give me this job. There was like another smaller event where I'd done some interviews just to try and like get used to it, but that hadn't really prepared me. And I literally arrived, had no clue what I was doing, and co-hosted with Redeye, who guided me the whole way through because I think he could clearly see I didn't know what I was doing, but I kind of just went with the flow. Had some really bad moments the whole way through. I think it was like 4 days. But at the end of those 4 days, he was like, listen, there's something there. Like you obviously passionate. There's definitely something we can work with if you're ever serious about this, let me know. And I think it was a couple of months later, as I do, I decided I hated my boss and quit my job. Just quit because I was irritated. I had some savings. I
Okay.
think I had like 3 months of savings, and I was like, cool, you know what? I'll do some like freelance writing on the side, and I'm gonna see maybe this esports thing might work. Who knows? Reached out to Paul, and he kind of did some stuff with me over Discord. Went through a lot of stuff. It was actually pretty harsh. Like, was quite critical, but I'm grateful.
You
And
needed that type
then,
thing.
yeah, 100%. I needed someone to be critical of what I was doing. He told me a lot of things. Actually, some things I still do. Like, I have this like weird thing with my eyes that I kind of look all over the place. I forget to look at the camera. Like, weird things like that. But like, it was much worse before. He went through those things and told me what to watch, and so I started doing that. And then he had obviously just started an agency, so he was like, I tell you what, like, I'll sign you to our agency, we'll get you some jobs. I went, sure. Like, but again, none of this I was serious about. And I think it was like 2 months later, I got my first gig, which was actually Gamescom. ESL hired me to do a Counter-Strike show match. So it was basically two professional players. It was Body and Apex, ironically enough. They were the captains of each team, and then fans could enter, and I hosted that. So we had like these four fans on each team playing with the two of them. And again, went there, had no clue what I was doing. Remember walking into the green room, and Pansy was at the same event because she was doing a PUBG event. I couldn't talk to her. I was so scared because she was just my idol. So I sat in the green room staring at her like a weirdo, and then went on stage and interviewed Body and Apex. I actually told Apex at Gamers 8 because he remembers. We had a good chuckle about it. A couple of months just on the major, when they won the major, we had a joke, like we had a laugh about it. And then at Gamers 8, I was like, dude, it's so surreal to me because at the time I was so scared because, I was just like full on fangirling inside. I was completely overwhelmed, but I was trying to be cool because, it's your first event. You think you have to
You're
be like
trying to be
super.
like, yeah.
Yeah, like I do this all the time. I've never done it. And inside I was like, oh my God, it's Apex. So that was pretty much that. And then from there, I just started getting gigs. My first one was
Mm.
Counter-Strike, but then I didn't do Counter-Strike for a long time. But that was kind of where I wanted to be honest. I just never got there. It took a couple of years to find myself in the game I wanted to be in.
Yeah, there's loads to unpack from that, and I think kind of starting chronologically. Something I was going to bring up anyways because it was something I read on Twitter, and it was maybe one of the most interesting headlines I looked at and went, oh shit. It was like, I think your exact quote, it was about the pool Redeye stuff, and it was about the job requirement, have a vagina. And I remember reading that and I just went, what the fuck? And I was in the car with my dad, and this is a conversation I've actually had a lot with my mom, because she, without getting into specifics, is very high up in her specific industry. And even though she is amazing at what she does, she has said very open to me that, like, yeah, there has been times where I have been hired because I am a woman, and I still don't know how to think about that. So looking at you as like as an individual, obviously you had that moment there, but have there been times afterwards that you felt like, okay, I have been hired as that like diversity pick, but then do you also sit there and go like, you know what, I've got here, I'm going to prove, I'm going to prove now why I should be here.
I think there's been a few times where, that was the first one, and I think that the biggest thing is I own it. So I do think that
Yeah.
sometimes you just have to go. Like, I know that first one was cool. I'm the diversity hire. It wasn't hidden from me. It was pretty obvious. Like, there were people far more qualified to be on that stage than me who put in a lot of time in the South African esports scene. But it's crude, but I had the vagina. I think what's important is you have to kind of own it. So I think where it can be problematic is when you don't own that. When you turn around and say, well, I deserve to be
Yeah.
here. Sometimes you
Okay.
have to be like, I do think I deserve to be here, but also I know why I got the job over someone else. In the case of Masters, I didn't deserve to be there. I can say that now, and
Okay.
I'll own that. And it's happened a few times since then, but my thing has always been like, okay, I'm not happy about how the door was opened, but I'm still going to step through it. I just always hope that the people I work with and the players and the people watching the show never look at me and be like, oh, she shouldn't be here. She was obviously hired because she's a woman. I hope that the job I do makes them go, okay, cool. Like, actually, she knows what she's doing. Well, she's done a good job, and they don't think about it like, oh, well, she did a good job for a woman. I want them to just say she did a good job. But I'm not. I don't think I'm naive enough to not know that gender sometimes plays a role. I don't think anymore. I think that I've done enough now that, like, when I get hired,
Yeah.
it's because of the job I do. But back then, I do think that it was that. I mean, that in that particular instance, I went through the door, and I don't think I did a good enough job to keep going, but it was by no means great. But since then, I think the few times it has been a diversity hire, I do believe I've been able to walk in and prove that actually I do belong here. And yes, you might not have known about me, and I might have only got hired because I'm a woman, but now you've seen me work, and you know that like I'm actually passionate about what I do, and I'm gonna try to do the best job for the whole broadcast team.
Yeah, I mean that makes complete sense. And going then kind of continuing that chronological order, you were talking about how when you're making content, it was all open. You were like, I need to make it as open as possible. However, you look at what you're doing right now, especially these interviews. If you don't know, if anyone doesn't know, make sure to go check out Sam down. Like her links will be down below. I think it's season 4 of your interviews are looking at very specific things, and you've got like photographer, lawyer, coach, analyst. How is your mentality now changing, going from this open perspective to now being like you literally couldn't get any niche? Like, how has your perspective changed and everything?
So I think back in the beginning when I was really young, and especially from the region I was in, where I like South African, we if we got like 200 concurrents watching a championship, we thought we would done such a fantastic job, which is horrifying when you think about it. And at the time there was a lot of conversation about how do we get more people to watch esports. And in my mind, which was very naive, was okay, cool. Why do I watch football? I don't play football. Why do I watch football? Well, it's entertaining. I love the characters. I love the production of it. I love the show of it. So we have to do, in my mind, you have to make it a show. And I'm also a firm believer, and I still actually believe this at its core, that we watch because we love the game, but we love the players more. We love their stories. We become very invested in who they are as characters, or I want to say people, but a lot of the time it's because we turn them into characters and become
Yeah.
invested in that. And so for me, I was like, cool, if I can show these players as like interesting characters that people can invest in, people will come and watch more esports. I've changed since then. I don't think we need to get more people to watch. I'm like, I do think you also have to have a vested interest in the game. I don't, or in esports in general. I just don't think. I think esports is so far removed from traditional sports in that regard because there's so many games and they're so different. And ultimately, if you're not a fan of the game, if you're not playing the game, the likelihood is you're probably not going to be too interested in watching it. I have no interest in watching League of Legends. I'm it's phenomenal. I know that the broadcast talent on there are some of the best in the world. I think they probably put on a fantastic show. It's just not my game. I like watching people shoot each other. So I'm just never going to go there. I'll maybe watch like their big world's finals because it's a big moment, but I'm never going to be vested in that. And that was where I kind of changed and went, you know what, like it is a niche and people are far more interested. If people know who these players are, they know stuff. They know all the things that you think you can tell them. So tell them something new. And then, I mean, with regards to my content, I just do that because I find those people's stories really interesting. My whole podcast is just from season 1 all the way through to now. It's been my own little personal passion project. I meet people, I think they're absolutely fascinating, and I just want to talk to them and find out more about them. And I used it as an excuse. The content is the excuse to convince them to come chat to me, but it's really just an opportunity for me to like pick their brains because I think their stories are fascinating, and I think I think that's the best part of our job. The people you meet along the way are so interesting. Everyone comes from such different places, and we're all united by the fact that I mean, it's mainly Counter Strike now, but we're gamers and we love what we do, and that's kind of why I do that.
Yeah, I mean, like I'm actually identical. Like when I first met you in Sweden, those interviews I was doing was like I want to improve my casting, and now I've gone full circle, and I'm like, crap, I think I'm going to be doing interviews now. But yeah, so it's really interesting. Yeah, like I think it's so true about like when you meet people, I think people realize how like awesome it is to talk to people in this industry, and like everyone is actually really cool. But looking a little bit at South African esports, you mentioned there like going from the basement to the big shining light, and then that's actually going to kind of be like a blip. How has that progressed in the last like what 7 years? Is that still a thing that it was a blip? How in general has South African esports grown? Like, are we still in that basement a little bit, or is it got a little bit, or like where is the levels there?
I'm probably going to piss a lot of people off, but I'm trying this new thing this year where I don't sugarcoat what I say. I actually think South Africa's gone a bit backwards from an esports point of view.
Ooh.
And I'll explain to you why I think that. I think that if you look at esports, it starts with us, right? As a community, we start it. So we're playing in the basement and we're building it.
Yeah.
And I think South African esports missed this giant step. And I liken this to a baby. I've done this before. It's something that, but I think it's such a good example. When you're a baby, you learn to crawl, then you stand up and you wobble around and you fall over a bit, and then you learn to walk. And then eventually you can run, and then maybe you can do a marathon one day. South African esports missed all of those things. So what happened was is we were kind of crawling around, getting a feel for things, and then all this money came from like nowhere. And it was huge amounts of money because a bunch of executives that controlled budgets were watching international events, which were 4, 5, 6 years ahead of our time. International events in countries and regions where they had incredible internet infrastructure, where they had access to technology, versus our country where the majority of people live in South Africa live under the breadline. Like they can't afford to eat, they can't afford running water. But we skipped all of that and went, cool, we're going to throw all this money at people playing on their PCs. And suddenly we were doing these massive shows, and it was like a land grab for cash. And there was people were overcharging, people were not qualified to do what they were doing. Businesses went bankrupt, people lost a lot of money. I can go through all the stories because I worked for some of them, and I suffered those things. And then those people kind of just disappeared. They like washed their hands of it. And the folks that got hurt in the long run were the players. And over the years, all that I've kind of seen happen is the money's dried up, but the same people will come in and try and do these. We're constantly trying to do these big shows versus trying to build from the ground up. I think that there's certain titles that have figured it out. So like a lot of the fighting games and FIFA have realized that they had to start small and sort of build up, and they've gone on to do really well. Like our FIFA players, I think 2 of them are now ranked like in the top 10 in the world and are competing on a really good level, but they had to build for a very long time to get there. Our fighting games community has kept their stuff in the basement for a long time. And they then started doing, there was one tournament that happened every year, which is called Red Bull Hit the Streets, which was all about bringing, like, you could do these on like these qualifiers and you could come and play in this final game. That kind of built it up to the fact that we then got Red Bull Kumite, which is like that massive fighting games tournament, to South Africa, which I think was the first big international event to be here. But all of that took a lot of time and a lot of community building. Whereas I think for the most part, esports in South Africa, the community is missing. And we have this like weird tendency to like just jump on whatever trend. Like it's insane to me. I'm going to give you an example. And again, I'm going to be in so much trouble for this, whatever, like such is life. But they've
Okay.
just announced that they're launching Valorant servers in South Africa.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's great. Okay, fantastic. In the past 48 hours, the Valorant servers will probably drop this weekend. So it's Thursday when we're chatting. Obviously, when you watch us, it'll be whatever other day, but they will launch them this weekend. I have seen in the past 24 hours 4 different organizations be like, we need to sign a Valorant team. The servers haven't dropped. There's no tournaments. There's no discussion from Riot as to whether we're going to be pulled into their infrastructure, their competitive infrastructure. There's nothing in terms of like events happening, but we're going to sign 4 Valorant teams. So what'll happen is a bunch of Counter-Strike players will jump because it's an excuse to sign to an org, and like Valorant will happen for a bit, then it will fall away, and everyone will move back. We saw it with Fortnite, then Apex got launched, and suddenly all the South African Fortnite players were playing Apex, and all the orgs were signing Apex people, and then like 6 months later, the orgs will drop them. That's like the common cycle that happens here, and I feel like the few organizations and players that have succeeded on an international level have kind of stuck in their lane and gone, okay, cool, this is going to be really tough, but we're going to grind. Like a Bravado went, we want to do Counter Strike.
Yeah.
We're going to grind this. We're going to go overseas. We're going to lose a stack of money,
Yeah.
but this is what we want to do. Or like there's these FIFA players, and I followed their journey for a long time. They've been playing, like Julio, one of them used to go overseas all the time and lose, but he kept going. He kept putting in the work, and now he's one of the best in the world. Like that, he kind of understood that that's what he had to do. I feel like South African esports as a whole, they don't like doing the work. Like the grind is not the building it up isn't really what they want to do. That was a lot of talking about a region that most people don't really care about, but there you go.
Yeah, because I'm not gonna lie, this sounds identical. I don't know if you know the CGS, like 2008, kind of like the big boom. Yeah, like this literally sounds like a kind of copy and paste of CGS. Like nothing's really there, and then oh my God, you look at this, like loads of money, and then because the money then all goes, you then have this vicious cycle of like turmoil. And I still believe, and I wrote an interesting paper about, I believe the NACS scene is where it is because of the CGS, even though that was over 15 years ago. Um, do you think like well for South African esports, like what is the solution then? Like is there anything? Like it sounds like there's this really vicious cycle of it's just going bad, 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 and then the country as well is making it almost worse with like load shedding. Like what is the outcome and future of this all?
So if you'd asked me this like 3 years ago, I had a very different answer because I used to be all about
Okay.
puppies and rainbows. Now I'm like, here's the truth, and it's an ugly truth, and no one ever wants to hear it. Our player base is just not big enough. Like we have a very small
Yeah.
player base because a lot of people, our internet infrastructure is horrific. Access to data is so overpriced in our country. So a lot of people can't afford to play online. It's too expensive. Technology is extremely expensive. Importing, if you want to buy a PC here or a PlayStation, it's a really costly exercise. Now, with all the new gen tech, you need the TV to go with it, or the monitors, or all of that. Over and above that, we have issues like you mentioned, load shedding, which is basically where they switch our power off. So if you are lucky, like me, you can. I don't say lucky, like we work really hard to afford it. We have backup solutions like solar power and stuff, but that's extremely expensive because obviously because there's load shedding, the demand for that technology is so through the roof that the prices are through the roof. So I think that we have inherent social dynamic, like social issues that need to be fixed, and then we have basic access to technology that needs to be fixed. And unfortunately, in my opinion, esports doesn't grow until we can grow gaming, and gaming is not going to grow until we can fix those issues. I think there are certain games that definitely can grow, and we've seen them grow. But this is another thing which I've always said is I think that a lot of South African esports, the industry, focuses so hard on what everyone's doing overseas without realizing that people in Europe are, or they see tournaments in Europe for Counter Strike. Europe is 4 or 5 years ahead of us in terms of knowledge, in terms of understanding, and in terms of an infrastructure that can support this. What we should be focusing on is what makes us uniquely South African. Our FIFA players are some of the best in the world. We have one of the most vibrant competitive FIFA communities. If you want to invest in South African esports, invest in that community. Fighting games, hugely accessible because everyone, especially here, used to go down to the corner shop and there was all the arcades were in there and you could put your coin in and you could play Street Fighter or Tekken or Mortal Kombat. So invest in fighting games because it's accessible, one, and two, most people are familiar with it. Like that for me is kind of where South African esports falls short. We're trying so hard to replicate the rest of the world instead of kind of going, we're not the rest of the world. We have like some really unique challenges. Let's figure out how we fix these. And then, we can worry about the rest of it. Whereas I think what ends up happening, and I mean, it makes sense, right? Anyone who gets into the esports industry is normally passionate about esports. A lot of people, you're passionate about your game. I'm passionate about Counter Strike. Like, that's my game. I don't think it's accessible enough to South Africa. And if I was focusing on building South African esports, Counter Strike probably wouldn't be where I invest my money, type of thing. But I think someone watching overseas Counter Strike is going to be like, well, I want to spend money on Counter Strike because I love that. So it's like a very difficult, nuanced answer. I do think, like you mentioned, I've always said this, we are 4 or 5 years behind everyone else. But if you watch the things that happened 4 or 5 years ago to Europe, to North America, if you watch that, we could learn from it. I just worry we don't learn because the same people 4 years ago who took a lot of money and made a huge amounts of mistakes, they disappeared during COVID and now they're all back running events. And I'm like, well, are we learning or are we just
Yeah.
doing the same thing time and time again? I'm being very negative about South Africa. I don't mean to, but I think it's just you kind of reach a point where you get a little bit older, you work a bit more, and you start seeing behind the curtain. 4 years ago, I really believed that we could be the best in the world, but now I understand that like there are things that exist and issues that exist that need to be addressed, and I think that they're far bigger than esports. They're far bigger than gaming.
Yes, and I think you were saying like, oh, it's I'm being really negative. I feel like if you're not being negative, then there's not going to be it's not going to have any progression. Because if you keep on saying that, being like, oh my God, we're amazing, we're doing the best, it's like you're going to continue making those mistakes as you said. So identifying them and actually being like, look, this is an issue. Someone might look at that and go, crap, maybe this is an issue. And I think this is like honestly, I've heard about South African esports, but I think I've never heard about it in depth like that. And I think that's an incredibly insightful perspective. And I am glad you have hit this kind of like mentality of like I don't care if I upset people. this is how it is. And I feel like that it's something you come with time. I don't think I'm even there with like expressing my opinions too
I
vocally.
The other thing is you say that, but I do care. Like I will feel bad because I know that the people that are working in South African esports, I've
Yeah.
been in the trenches with them. They're so passionate, and
Oh
I'm
yeah, yeah.
passionate, and the players are passionate. But so I do care if I upset them. But I also feel like sometimes the truth is rough. You know, like when I started out, a lot of people called me cringe girl, and I had to listen to a lot of people tell me how rubbish I was. The truth is rough. But if you listen to it and you go, okay, why is someone saying this, and you try and understand why maybe, or try and see their point of view, even if you disagree with it, you could probably learn something. Unless it's like HLTV, then some. I mean, actually, no, I'm lying. I've learned some stuff from HLTV, so I take that back.
As in like the actual HLTV or the
No, the
forums?
forums, the forums. When I
Oh,
say HLTV, I
oh,
always mean the
that's
forums.
bold. That's bold for you to look at. Even like, oof,
I
we've
go there
had
all the time.
few. That's
I'm a Counter Strike
bold.
fan. I've been on those forums
Yeah,
for
but like,
years. But I
yeah,
only set up
same.
my account this year. This was the first year I
Okay.
actually set up an account, and then I commented once, and I was like, never again.
Yeah, never again. And ooh, it's a dangerous
I'm
game to
lying.
be
I
in.
actually do think I commented after that, but there you go.
How dare you? But okay, so you were talking there about like you were saying like cringe girl, and you were saying like all these things about how hard it is to come out. Sorry, cringe girl is quite funny actually,
It is
but
very funny.
you've said an interesting story before about how like the Luminosity guys back in like 2016 and like there's kind of other Brazilians and other maybe like minority regions inspired you. Do you feel like you maybe are now in that position where you are inspiring other people because you have come through and you have done maybe like the impossible going from this region to now the major? Do you see yourself potentially in a position where you're like, okay, I am now that kind of like new form story?
I think a lot of people have said it to me. I don't ever see I don't like, it's not like I don't look in the mirror and be like, oh my gosh, I'm such an inspiration. That doesn't happen. No, I mean,
Okay, yeah.
I just do my thing. I hope, I would like to think that when the time comes and I kind of go, okay, cool, I'm done with this, that there is space for other South Africans. I just think that there is a lot of talent in South Africa, broadcast talent, and I think we lack. I think there's natural talent, far more natural than I was, and I think that we lack the opportunities to gain experience. So the problem is if you stay in the tiny bubble, that's all you know, right? So you can only learn from the people in the tiny bubble, or you learn by watching and emulating people you see overseas. But you only can really improve and adapt to your own style when you get out the bubble. It's that thing of like you're in the little pond until you jump into the ocean. You're never going to really learn to swim. So I hope I don't, to answer your question, no, I don't look at myself and be like, oh, look at me, I'm an inspiration. All I hope is that I have opened a door to allow other South Africans to get hired and to maybe give tournament organizers or who's ever making the hiring decisions a little bit more confidence to go, hey, you know what, actually, let's give that person in that far off region we've never heard of a chance, because this one time we gave someone else a chance and they did a decent job. That's what I hope happens.
Okay. And for kind of this part of the interview, I want to move away from maybe it's like early and like and the general topic. This has lasted way too much longer than I thought it would be. I think it's because I got too interested in what we were talking about. But I actually want to talk maybe like about your career now. And I think you've got a very interesting career. Of you've always said like, and recently to me a lot actually, you've always been like CS is my life, and I love CS, but from a CS fan perspective, you kind of came out of nowhere last year. However, as I was saying, like you have that rich history of doing so much before. So do you want to kind of run me through and run us through how you started getting into like these international sphere, which was mostly Overwatch with the Contenders League, and why you weren't maybe as into CS in an international stage until literally like last year?
Okay, cool. So yeah, I started in South Africa. I did masters, I did Dota and Counter Strike, and then I just did Counter Strike, and I love Counter Strike. And everyone says you need to focus in on your game, right? When you start, they're like, choose your game. So Counter Strike, I was like, this is the game. And then I got signed by this international agency, and obviously Paul was involved, but there were other people involved as well. And they all sat me down, and I was like, my game is Counter Strike, and they were like, nah, there's no space in Counter Strike for you. Like there's
Okay.
too many people. The pool is very deep. That's not going to be your space. And you should probably, because you're coming from South Africa, you should probably just do whatever comes your way. Don't narrow it down to one title. Do lots of titles, host lots of things, interview lots of things. And I was like, okay, because like opportunity for someone far away is concerning. Your flights are more expensive, so like you need to kind of take what gets offered. And that was the route I did. So I ended up, I think it was Gamescom. I did Counter-Strike there, and then I did the first ever Dragon Ball Fighters fighting games tournament. Then I did a Crossfire tournament in China, which is like Counter-Strike, just bad.
Yeah.
Um, and then the Overwatch opportunity came along where they were looking for someone, and I'll never forget this. Blizzard asked me to do an audition
Huh?
because they wanted me to do like an audition to camera as like a desk host to show how I would desk host. And I'm so ashamed to admit this. I knew the characters of Overwatch because I'd like played it a little bit. This was months before I got hired, but they wanted this audition. But the audition, and I don't have it anymore, but like I remember this clearly. We filmed it in a studio with two of my CS friends, and I literally spoke about Counter-Strike, and then instead of using players' names, I just used the Overwatch characters' names instead. So like I'd be like Grim Reaper, da 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 bomb, whatever, which is like nothing like Overwatch. But then obviously they saw that and they were like, okay, this is cool, but you really like don't know the game. And then I spent when they said they were gonna hire me, like I spent a lot of time. I'd been playing it casually, but like not nearly enough to like get into the esports side of it. So then I spent months like playing and watching Overwatch League and like better understanding it. But I still did basically like a Counter-Strike desk for my Overwatch audition. And then I got into Overwatch, and then that became my focus. And then I kind of just felt like it just was the style of broadcast didn't suit me. They weren't going to bring me back for another season of Contenders. There were other things I could do in Overwatch, but I was like, oh, I feel like I'm a little bit, there's like a cheekiness to me that I didn't feel suited the broadcast style that they liked. So when they said they were cutting down Contenders, but like if I was interested, I'd need to do like some other stuff. I kind of was like, oh, I don't know. The game didn't feel right. And then a PUBG opportunity came up, and I did that. And I was doing so much other stuff. I did a bunch of Nintendo games. I've done PUBG. I even did e-golf. I went to Made in Denmark, which is a golf tournament, and I shoutcasted. I didn't even host. I actually shoutcasted e-golf. So I learned about golf for like 2 months and I commentated with like this really big golfing YouTuber who was like, his mind was blown that like e-golf even existed. And I was just like, dude, I'm commentating e-golf. Like that's where I'm at. So like full on golf commentary. I did everything. Like if it came, I didn't say no. That was like my rule. Like I would learn. And then at the beginning of last year, I moved agencies and I was actually going to retire from broadcast. At the beginning of last year, just before I moved agencies, I was done. I was like, you know what?
Holy shit.
I love what I'm doing and I love my job, but one, I find it really difficult to jump between games. It's really hard because it's really difficult to like, I could do the research and I could get there, but I felt like I couldn't really like intrinsically get myself involved because I just never knew how long I was there for before they moved me to something else. And then also I was just like, the game that I'm watching, like I said, I'm on the HLTV forums every week because I'm a little troll. Like I'm on Twitter, I'm watching all the YouTube videos, like all the gossip. Like that's the game. Like if I have to what am I not doing when I'm not working? Like that's the game. I'm invested in this. And so I kind of was like, maybe this isn't for me. If there isn't space for me in Counter-Strike, like maybe I need to think about it. I love PUBG and I love the community because I've been with them for a while, but I was kind of like, I don't know if that's enough to kind of keep me. And then I changed agencies, and the new agency said to me, "Can you give us like a couple of months? Don't retire." And I was like, "Okay." And I was like, "But I want to do Counter-Strike," and they were like, "Noted." And I have to. I mean, I think I want to thank them because I think that they went out to speak to a lot of the people because I'd worked with so many people over the years. But the resounding thing was they would like, she really wants to do Counter-Strike, and almost everyone came back and said, "What? I didn't know that was something she wanted to do." Oh shit! Like yeah, that makes sense. And I think it was just a matter of asking, and maybe the fault's on me because for many years I just never asked. I just, one time someone said there's no space for you, and I never asked. So yeah, and then we just started asking, and eventually I got given a shot at Pinnacle. Black Molly had worked with me on PUBG, and they were like, yeah, cool, we'll bring you in. They took a huge risk because that could have backfired. But yeah, then I was at Pinnacle and I ran around like a child being so excited because I got to meet all my heroes, and it was awesome. And that was kind of where it was. And obviously, I've been very lucky. I've decided that this year I'll focus on like Counter-Strike and PUBG because I don't want to just leave PUBG because I do feel like I've become attached to that community. But yeah, I wanted to do Counter-Strike, and I'm really grateful that I'm there, and I hope that I do a good enough job to stay there. But if I don't, then I'll go find something else to do. It won't be esports broadcasting though. Maybe I'll be like an HLTV forum mod. I don't know if they have those, but I feel like it would work well for me.
I feel
I
like
spent
that'd
a
be
lot of time there.
Jesus Christ. That's
Yeah,
like
I love
I feel like that'd be some step going from major host to HLTV forum mod.
I would do that in my
Um,
free time. I'm on it so much. I wouldn't mod anything though. I mean, those are toxic, terrible place, but some people are really funny on there. I
oh
laugh.
yeah, I can imagine. Okay, there's a lot to. I actually want to. I actually fuck it. We'll talk about HLTV forums. That is something that like I thought that's a slippery slope to step because I think especially women in esports get a lot of hate for no reason, and it's just based on your gender, and it's really bad. Do you like that feels like a slippery slope going on HLTV forums? Like, yeah, you can find funny stuff and cool stuff, but I can't imagine like if there is something bad about you, like how does that make you feel? Like, like does it affect you, or do you just sit there and go,
No, it affects me. One, they're quite good at I've noticed that the one thing that I'll give them credit for in the last, I don't know how long it's been going on. I think it's been about like a year and a half. They get the bad stuff gets taken down really fast.
okay, yeah,
So pretty good. I think that, I mean, sometimes I go on there and I'm horrified by what I see, but then sometimes I'll read something that's really funny. Sometimes I've read stuff about me that's made me laugh, like a lot. Sometimes I've read stuff that's made me very sad. But I kind of, I mean, I normally just go on there because I kind of enjoy reading people's really like people's opinions when people talk like from their chest with such
yeah,
authority about stuff. And I'm just like, no ways. I mean, obviously, when I was a fan, I was like, oh, maybe. Now I'm like, nah, that's not happening. But like, it's funny. But I mean, it does affect you. Obviously, you get like a lot of negativity, and I think it's always tough from the woman's standpoint because there's so much commentary on the way we all look, and then we all get compared. I see that all the time.
so,
They never
yeah,
do like. I mean, actually, they do it with the guys. So, but it's far more with the women. Like we're always compared. Like this one looks like this one looks like that, which can be like it can be a bit frustrating. But I'm trying to get myself to the point where it's easier said than done because sometimes it does get under my skin. Like there's certain things that like everyone has their insecurities. So if you touch on my insecurities, I'm gonna feel it. But I'm also like at the point where we kind of choose this life. So it is what it is. Like we do choose to put ourselves in front of camera, which means
mm.
someone is gonna have a comments about the way you look. But the worst I get is that people don't like my accent, which I cannot change. So I feel like, what am I gonna do? You know?
That yeah, that seems so like almost like dumbfounding. It's like okay, like this is literally what I'm born with. But coming back to what you're saying about quitting, like that is wow. Like I didn't realize that was kind of like the stage you were at. And did that make like does that almost put a little bit more pressure on when you were at Pinnacle, and then you have like the RMRs and kind of it's or like the impact afterwards, like does that make you almost sit there and be like, I cannot screw this up? And does that add like a little bit extra more pressure on yourself?
Yes and no. I think I've never thought about it as I can't screw this. I don't think about the future. And I think that the
Yeah.
reason I don't do that is because I come from a region where what I do was never possible. When I started, I got so much negativity from people being like, there's no place for you here. Then there was, you can never make a job out of this. Then it was, no one from South Africa goes overseas. You will definitely not go overseas. And then I went overseas and I kind of did a gig, but then there was always, I was always unsure about when the next gig would come because I was this unknown person in South Africa. You know, I didn't have a game that I was loyal to. I was far away. I don't get to do the industry, what do they call it? Like the networking, because I'm not there.
Yeah.
So
You
I
can't
don't
just
get
show up
to
to places.
exactly like other people will pitch up at events and they will network and do that whole thing. I can't do that. Like I'm far away. So I think there was never expectation where I was like, oh, this is going to be I'm going to do this and then this will be the next step. It was kind of like, be very grateful for every opportunity you have. And just for me, I've always like, I just want to do a good job. Like, I think it's just like a needy insecurity in me from since I was a kid, where like I just want to do the best possible job. I want to put on the best possible show. Like I want the team I'm working with to be comfortable and happy. I want the players to have the best time, and I obviously want the viewers to get the experience that I get because I watched for so long. Like I was all the way here. We don't have access to big Counter-Strike events. We don't like going to a major is a big thing to fly on a plane and book accommodation. And it's not a 2-hour flight or a train ride. Like it's a big thing. So for me, we have to get visas and all of that. So for me, I watched so much of this at home that I was like, all I want to do is make someone watching feel the same way I feel when I watch, and like feel that same because I used to get so excited and feel like I was there and feel like I had like this, watch. I used to watch Machine so much when he desk hosted and he was like one of my favorites. But people always say they mute the desk. I never muted Machine's desks. I used to like love watching Machine and I felt like he would make me feel like I was there and part of the show. And that was kind of always been like what I want to do. But I've never gone, okay, if I stuff up obviously in the back of my mind, I know if I stuff up, I don't work again, but it's never been a thing of you must do well here so you get the next gig. It's more like just do the best possible job because this probably, maybe you never get hired again, which drives my friends and family mad, but I'll always come home and be like, I'm unemployed now. So like, maybe I'll never work again in esports. Like you just never know. So that's kind of where I'm at. So I feel like that's always just been my thing is like just do a good, really, really good show and make sure that like you do justice to the game and the players.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point that I will come on to later. But this is something that you've kind of touched on there, and you mentioned a little bit before. So hear me out with this one. When I was first going to events, like actually the Pinnacle events, my boss who said to me, he was like, "You're not a fan. Don't act like a fan. Act like you deserve to be there." And something I find really refreshing about you is that you act like you deserve to be there, obviously, but you don't hide that you are a fan, and you're very vocal with being like, yeah, like I am a fan of this person, I'm a fan of this person, and I feel like that elevates you a lot. Why do you feel like there is this persona that people are just like, I'm not a fan and I'm not gonna fanboy over people, etc.? Like, do you understand what I mean?
I do because I used to be like that. I don't know. I
Mm,
think like in the last, like I said, I kind of had like this change of heart at the beginning of last year
mm,
and I do think it was the best thing I ever did for my career where I kind of went, and I think I'm doing better work now than I ever did because at the beginning of last year, I just kind of went, you know what? I tried for so many years to fit in the box. Like, the box, like they tell you that this is what a desk host needs to look like. And then when I
yeah,
commentated, this is what a commentator needs to look like and sound like, and this is your job. And then whichever game I was in, I would watch, the broadcast and I would get so involved in the game and be like, okay, cool, this is what they want you to be. And then that moment where I was like, I kind of need to quit. I think it was about also feeling like I just don't get to be myself. Like I'm trying so hard to be what everyone says we have to be in this industry. And I hate it because it's just not who I am. Like I am like this is just not me. That was kind of where I was. And then when I decided to like give it one more go, I was also like, I'm just gonna unapologetically be who I am. My style is, especially when it comes to desk hosting, is not for everyone. Like I have a very different style to most. Like I mess around, I make jokes, I take jabs at analysts. Sometimes I decide to have an opinion, like that. I'll ask like random questions that have nothing to do. Like I love talking about the mental game is like my favorite because everything
oh
is
yeah, naturally.
Game of Thrones, mental, like that's my thing. And like, so that I just kind of decided to lean into that style. And I also decided to for Pinnacle, which was my first CS event, I didn't know if I'd ever get hired for CS again. So you know what? When you get to meet Glaive, you're gonna fangirl. When you get to interview Fallen and Forest, first day interviewing Forest, I was like, dude, this is the best day of my life. I think I told him that before I interviewed him. I was like, oh my God, best day of my life. And he was like, you're so
He was
weird.
like,
And I was like, I
cool.
know. I was like shaking. And Forest was my first interview, and I was like, oh my gosh, like what this? Oh, I did Crims the day before, and I was just like, dude, this is so cool. You're Crims, and he was like, yes. What is wrong with you? Like, but I just kind of at that point I was like, I don't even know if I get to do this again. So like, shit, I'm not gonna. I get the whole thing of being professional. Don't fanboy. You don't want to come across as that person to the players. You don't want to come across that person to your broadcast talent. You want to be taken seriously. You want to be professional. But when my first Counter-Strike events, I was like, I never know if I get to do this again. So I'm just going to be like us. And then I got another gig, but then there were more people there that I was excited about. So I just carried on doing it. And then I started getting to work with like broadcast talent that I love. And I was like, of course I'm going to tell them I love them because I never know if I'll see them again. I told Henry G this at Gamers 8. I met him. We were in an elevator and I was like, dude, I'm so stoked to get to work with you. You've been one of my idols. And he was like, you really need to get new idols. And I was just like,
That's such a Henry thing to say.
he
When
was
he's
like,
like, you should
and
not
I was
idol
just like,
me.
I'm just so excited that you're here. You know, I got to meet Stunner, who someone I've watched for a long time. I dig his style. I was like, dude, it's so cool. You know, like I just feel also I do think that sometimes we just don't tell people how we like. I think people if you like the work someone does, tell them. I don't think it makes you
Yeah,
unprofessional. I think if a player has played such a big role in your life, like Fallen for me, like I watched him on that
yeah,
journey and saw what he did. Played a big role in my life, and he had a big impact on me. Going, shit, anyone can do this. So I'm gonna tell him. He made me happy. I met Device at IEM Cologne, and I was like, dude, watching you play makes me happy. Like that's
he's
you
like,
know.
ooh.
I mean, I think they all think I'm a little bit weird, but it is what it is. Like, you know, I am weird, so I'm okay with that now. So I just think that that's
Yeah,
like, I think it's important to be like, this is who I am. Like, I am that person that gets like overly
yeah.
excited. I am a little bit silly and goofy. I am cringe girl sometimes. So fuck it, I'm just gonna lean into it.
Yeah. I actually find that so refreshing to hear because like this is something that people almost look down upon when you say stuff like this. And like Sweden was for the same event, like that was my first anything. And I was there interviewing Glaive on like a random seat in like a handball arena. And I was like he'd say something and I wouldn't even listen. Like my whole head was just going, oh my god, holy shit, it's Glaive. And like all these things, like I think it doesn't get talked about enough. And I think it is really refreshing to finally sit down and be like, I can say this and people aren't gonna be like, oh my god, that's so weird. And yeah, I think it's just pretty cool. But getting back on track a little bit, so you were doing all these different events and you've done so many different games. Do you feel like when you first did CSN, when you came to Pinnacle, when you did all these different hosting events and interviews, it felt like it was maybe your time and that you were as ready as you could have been because you had all that experience potentially?
Yeah, actually, I had this conversation with someone a couple of months ago. I think that I needed to kind of get to that point where I was like, you know what, screw it, I'm just going to be myself. This is
Yeah.
who I am in order to get the gigs that I wanted. Because I think now I'd like to think, I hate talking about myself, it always makes me sound so up my own ass. I like to think that like I bring something different to the table. Whereas I worry that maybe like 3 years ago I was just a bad version of everyone else.
I get what you
And
mean, yeah.
yeah, I still have so much to learn, and I really have to improve. And like, there's things I could be sharper on, and there's so much I need to work on. But I feel like I'm a better desk host now than what I was like 4 years ago. So I think I had to go through all of that stuff, like that sort of learning to get to the point where it could be a situation of like, okay, cool, like I don't think you're ever ready, but like that I think I can actually bring some value to the table. But saying that, like I still have massive imposter syndrome every time I'm at a Counter-Strike gig. And then also I'm like every time I'm like, oh my God, look who it is. And I think some of the talents got a bit like not sick of me, but I think that they find it quite weird. Like I know James Banks is always like, I'm like, can you go ask this person if I can get a photo? Because they know you. I don't want to go up and be weird. Like, can you ask this person if I can get a selfie? But then I'll go on the desk and be really critical about how they played. But I'm like, but I still that. Like I'm still a fan, but I'm doing my job. And like
Yeah.
those sort of
You don't
things.
let it interfere. Like there's a difference.
Yeah, like so it's cool though. Like I mean I think that I don't want to say it was the right time, but I feel like it's the right time when it's time. So
Yes.
I suppose that's the easiest way to put it.
Yeah, I think that's actually something you can kind of like. It isn't that is the message you've kind of sent there isn't just for esports. Like that's life. Like don't try fit in a box and don't try and be a bad version of what is the known. Like if you do something if you do something that's you, it might not be like perfect, but it's something unique and it's something different and it is actually distinguishable. And then so looking at the major, oh my god, that was like I remember I saw the major. I was like, oh my god, Sam's done it. Like she's at the major. Looking at like your just mental perspective when you said when you got that news and when you were at the major, like did you ever think that, especially when you went from going, I'm gonna quit at the start of 2022, and then in the beginning of 2023, I'm doing the last ever CS:GO major. Did you ever think that was gonna be a thing?
No, I mean I'll tell you a funny story. I think it was the beginning of 2023, for the first time ever in my career. I put out a goal. I've never had a goal. I've always just, like I
Okay.
said, and I went, one day I would like to work a Counter-Strike major. That's what I said. And then they announced that the Paris major would be the only major of the year. And I went, I never forget, I found out the news and I said to one of my mates, I was like, oh, well, you see, this is why I don't set goals. What a lol. Like, I finally set a goal. We'll never meet it. What a joke. I
Yeah,
hate my life. I'm currently unemployed because I didn't have another gig. So I'll probably never work again, which is like the story. Like, I was going to joke and interrupt you just now and be like, well, to be honest, I don't have another gig coming up. So maybe I never work a Counter Strike gig again. Maybe, you know, like that's always my thing. I like to do that. I'm just like, oh, well, I'm unemployed. Or maybe I'll never do this again. But I was kind of there where I was like, well, I'm not going to get a major. And this is why I don't set goals. And what a joke. What a lol. And then I got the call for the Paris major. And I was still, when I had a chat with the person at Blast who hired me, I was like, nah, for real? It's not a joke? And they were like, no, we want you to
real?
desk.
Yeah.
Yeah, we want you to desk host. And I presumed there would be like a C or D stream that I was going to be on. And I was like, sweet, I'll take it. And then the emails started going out and it came to my attention that there wasn't going to be a B stream even, and that I was actually going to be desk hosting those first two stages like properly. And then I
Yeah.
shat myself for a bit and was like, I can't do this. And the world is crumbling. But yeah, and then I did it and it was cool and it was exciting and it's a fun thing. I think I was also like really prepared because I spent so much time on Reddit and HLTV forums that I knew exactly what everyone was going to say when it got announced. I was ready for that. I knew it was coming. So like all of that, because obviously when they announced me, everyone was like, who the hell is she? She hasn't proven herself in Counter Strike. She shouldn't be here. I was ready for that. I knew it was coming because I'm one of them. So I've spent enough time on there to know. And so that helped, I think, because I was just like, it's cool. Like, I'm going to come, I'm going to do the best job I possibly can. And maybe you'll like me. But then in my head, I was like, or maybe you won't, and it won't matter because then it'll just be my last Counter Strike job. But it was a major, and that's freaking cool, right? Which is kind of just
Yeah.
how that was my attitude. I just do the best I can. I was very nervous. I don't feel looking back I did the best job I could have because I was so nervous. I think towards the end I kind of started letting a little bit of me come out. I think in the beginning I was very like at the start of the major was very like, oh, just be as professional as you can. And then once I got into it, I feel like by IEM Cologne, people got a better taste of my personality because it was a bit more relaxed. But yeah, like I don't think the major was the best work I've ever done, but I did it, and that's cool. That was how I saw it.
Mm. Yeah, like actually building that was like not in a negative way, but like I do remember speaking to you on the first day and the last day and being like, there is a clear difference. Like that, it does feel like Sam has opened up just that little bit more of like what I remember from in Pinnacle. Um, but before we get any further, do you have a burner Reddit account, like sign that you use that like isn't under your name? I feel like that's something that is there.
No,
No,
no.
okay. I
Of
was
course.
just
Does
like.
anyone think that like this is always my thing when people are like, "Oh, Techgirl"? I was like, does anyone actually think that I play with the in-game name Techgirl? You think that I'm on like Techgirl was like part of a blog where I couldn't find a domain, and then it
Yeah.
became my work name. But I'm like, yes, I have a whole other life on the internet that no one will ever find. You will never find
Okay.
me in a game because it will never be Techgirl. You will never find me on Reddit. HLTV, I
Hmm.
now have an official Techgirl account, but I don't have a burner HLTV account.
Okay. Just
Yeah.
I was just wondering.
But yes, I
So
am. I'm like. I have a secret life. No, I'm joking.
oh, that would be a weird thing to reveal on this interview series. But
It turns out she's the biggest troll on the internet. It was her all along. It's that kind of vibe.
all those comments are actually her.
Yeah.
But yeah, like the major, I want to kind of delve into that. So like, where did that pressure come from? Was that self-inflicted pressure? You were like, I have to perform, or was that pressure being like, this is firstly the last CS2 major, and like everyone around you? Like, where did that pressure maybe come from?
I think it was self inflicted, but it was also it's the last CS:GO major. It's the
Hmm.
only one of the year. You need to do justice to the players. You need to do justice to the game, and you need to do justice to people watching.
Okay.
That was important for me, like because I am a fan of the game, and I wanted to make sure that whoever was watching felt the gravity of that, but also got a good show because I think that that's really important. And then obviously you're working with like some of the best people in the industry. So like for me, the best players in the world are there, and the best broadcast talents, and behind the scenes, just people that have been doing this for so long that like now you don't know them, they're just like nameless faces that you don't see because you're fans, but these are people that they were there building this game and building the esport from way back when. So like for me, it was like, the pressure was on to like live up to. I don't think it's expectation, but I think just live up to the standard that I believe they put out and the love that they have for the game, that they've been doing it for so long. Like you just want to make sure that you give the same energy. So I think it's just that, like you just want to. I always want to just do a good show. I don't care if people don't remember me. I don't care if no one knows who I am. I don't care about any of that. I just want to do a really good show because I think that that's why we do this job. And I know like lots of people say this, but like I really do mean it. Like that's just what I want to do.
Awesome. Like it's so obvious how passionate you are. And just coming towards the end here, I do want to ask because you do a song I've spoken to you a little bit about before of the perception of your role, like interviewer or host. Like obviously the major Cologne, you were known as host, but then you look at maybe something like the Gamers 8, you were under like content, and then Pinnacle, it was also interviewer. Is there a part of you that's kind of scared that TOs and yeah, like yeah, just TOs in general look at you and your perception is more of an interviewer than a host because the host is what your main role is, but you do sometimes get slotted into the interview role.
So I've done every role,
Yeah.
ironically enough. So I've done interviewer, I've done host. I was an analyst for fortnights. I know, lol. Shark, no build because you couldn't make me do build. A shark cast. I've done commentary for Valorant, PUBG, Fortnite, and Simrate. Like I've done lots of different things. So I feel like I've kind of felt my way around.
Mm.
For me, I think I am strongest as a desk host. I think
Yeah.
that's what I do, what I think that I do best out of all of them. I think I'm an absolutely shit commentator. Um, I've tried. I really have. I'm just not good at it. And my favorite role is interviewer, but I don't think I'm a good enough interviewer. Because I just think that I like having random conversations with people and asking questions that uh, most people just, it's cool on a podcast, but when you're at an event, it's probably not what people want to hear you talking about. So for me, it's like, I think my role as desk host is probably where I should sit, because I do think that's what I'm strongest at. It needs a lot of work. It needs some tweaking. I don't think I'm polished enough, but that's kind of, I think, what I'm best suited for. But I don't mind. Like I literally just like being there. So I'm like, cool. I sometimes I have no clue what I'm doing, and I'm just like, well, if I'm gonna be here and I get to hang around and I get to watch the games, hell, I'll take it. Like so long as I'm contributing in some way, like I'm keen. I'll jump in. I am quite passionate about a show, so like I wouldn't just sit there for nothing. I'd probably get angry and want to contribute in some way. And by contribute, I don't even need to be on camera. Like if I'm helping in some way, that's what I want to do. But I don't. If I'll do anything if it means that I just get to like be part of the traveling circus, right? So that's why sometimes I'll take the interviewer role. And also in recent months, I've started taking. I did an interviewer job for Challenger, and it was also because I felt like I need to like just hone my skills there because I do think that it's something that I could be better at. So I kind of see it as a challenge to like improve. The only thing that I just don't think I can improve is commentary. So still take a job if someone asked me if I wanted to do it, but I just don't think I'm very good.
Okay, yeah, it's really interesting because I think you were saying there like I don't even know what I'm doing sometimes with the Gamers 8 stuff. I remember you were like, "Oh crap, I'm going off. Can we reschedule the interview?" And it was like a really last minute thing. But I think we're going to end it there, Sam. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Bit of a long time in the making. We've spoken about this all the way back in May. It would have been now, so I'm really glad to get you on. You've had an absolute meteoric rise in like the last 2 years, and hearing that at one stage you were about to retire, I'm really glad that that isn't a reality we're living in. You're an absolute pleasure to listen to onto a desk, and you're an absolute pleasure to have on this interview series. And with that, thank you very much, everyone, for listening, and make sure to stay tuned next week for another episode on the INSITE channel.